Alan Roberts invited me to his half-term overview of helicopters at Aerospace Bristol last week. Now, I had no idea how influential Bristol was in the worldwide development of the helicopter. The following video is a recording of his presentation. I started learning to fly in 2013 and it took me 7.5 years to get my PPR licence due to a debilitating fear of flying. I created this channel to show some of my training and what's next for my flying hobby and to prove that it is possible to overcome a phobia. Welcome to the Phobic Flyer YouTube channel.
Right, hello everyone. I hope you're enjoying your visit to the museum. And I'm Alan Roberts and I'm an aerodynamicist. That means I learned lots of mathematics and all about engineering at university, but I liked dealing with all the mathematics of the flow round aeroplanes and the flow round helicopters too. And I learned all about that at university and then spent all my life working on the design of aeroplanes and things flying off aeroplanes and things flying under helicopters, etc. So I worked on what all the airflow does around them. But I'm going to tell you all about helicopters, I hope, or as much as I can in about 20 minutes. So first of all, I also am a pilot. I learned to fly over 60 years ago, and I learned to fly on things like the ones you saw over there, biplanes. And that's they taught almost everyone on biplanes in those days. That's a long time ago. So I've been flying for a long time and I still fly every month now. Right, so we'll start off with the family tree. The family tree of flying machines. And flying machines come in two sorts. There are some that are lighter than air. And what are the lighter than air ones? You can read it there. You've got balloons and airships, okay? And they stay up because they're lighter than air. What you put in gas in the balloons, gas which is lighter than air, and that holds them up in the air. Heavier than air machines have to find some other way of keeping up. So there are all these different ways of keeping up a heavier than air machine. You can have wings, rockets, jets, and air cushions. Now here we have lots of things with wings, fixed wings that is, like that. And we also have helicopters which are rotary wings. They are still wings. Those things that rotate round and round, they're sometimes called rotors, but they're really rotary wings. And the helicopters get their lift by making those wings go very fast by turning them round and round, and aeroplanes get their lift by going fast by having an engine which makes them go fast, and when the wings are going fast they push the air downwards and keep the aircraft up in the air. So the other things you can have jets. We talked about jets, and that is an aircraft which flies both with fixed wings some of the time when it's going fast, but it can take off and land vertically, so then it's just using its jets. And then you can have air cushions, and that's like, have you heard of some of the ferries that go across the Isle of Wight are hovercraft? And you've heard of hovercraft, have you? Hovercraft skim along over the water. They don't touch the water, but they use an air cushion, so they pump air into the area between them and the water, and that's what holds them up. So that's the other way of flying, if you like, but they're flying very low, of course. Aeroplanes and helicopters, rotary wings. Now we'll have a look at the name helicopter. It comes from helico, which is like a helix, and a helix is something that's winding or spiral. And you know what a spiral is, like that. And basically it's called that because the helicopter, when it winds around and goes up into the air, its wings are making a spiral shape in the air, okay, going up like that. So helico, and then this part here, the pter part at the end, is separate. The pter part means wing. And it's all Greek. These are Greek words. Helico is Greek for winding or spiral, and ptero is a wing in Greek. Okay, so, and that's actually in ancient Greek and modern Greek. It's the same word in both ancient and modern Greek. So if you ever go to Greece, that's what it comes from anyway, pter. And the pter is the same bit. If you put the pter with dactyl, what does that make? Yeah? Pardon? But it's a pterodactyl. And a pterodactyl has wing fingers, you see? And the dactyl part is another Greek word for fingers. So that's how that all comes about. We've talked about how they produce their lift, and helicopters can start off by having two. They never have, well, there have been one or two helicopters with only one wing going round and round with a weight on the other side. They were experimental ones, you don't see them much at all. There are quite a lot with two, just one each side and rotating round. The ones we have here are one with three over there, and this one has four on each rotor. You can see the four wings on the rotor. And this one has two rotors, each with four blades or wings. So, when did helicopters start in Bristol? Well, during the war, that's the Second World War, in the middle of the last century, they decided that they needed to look at this new technology because people had been experimenting with helicopters for some time in the 30s. And after the war, Bristol's decided that they wanted to be a helicopter manufacturer. So they actually, their chief helicopter designer was an Austrian who came over during the war because he didn't like Hitler, came over here, and by the end of the war he was the chief designer of helicopters at Bristol. And the first helicopter they produced was something like the Sycamore over there. The first one was the first prototype of that, but this is a later one. It started off with just a pilot and 3 passengers, but they said, oh, we've got to make it wider. We've got to have room for a stretcher, perhaps, and 3 passengers at the back and 1 at the front beside the pilot. So they put in extra seats and extra width. So that one was the first one that was made in Bristol, and it was made here at Filton. And they made about something like 80 of them for the RAF, and they were used in the RAF for search and rescue, going up to mountains and picking people off mountains. You still see that happening today, don't you? You see it on television when people are stuck on a mountain, or when their boat has sunk, or they've crashed in a small aeroplane at sea, and they go and pick people up out of the sea with helicopters like that. And they still do today, but that helicopter was in the 1950s and 1960s, quite a long time ago, and 80 of them were used mainly by the RAF. Then we come to the bigger helicopters. What they decided to do, having sold some of those helicopters, they said, we really want a much bigger helicopter which will carry more people. And all they did was take that helicopter and take the engine out of it, which is right down inside the fuselage. And you can see all the sort of the grills and things on the side, because the engine is behind all the passengers in that helicopter over there. And they put virtually the same front end on this helicopter. The front of this twin rotor helicopter is one of those helicopters on the front, and then they took the same engine and put it up the back there and put it in here. The engine is in the fuselage here, driving that rotor at the top there. But they didn't know this was the first ever twin rotor helicopter fore and aft twin rotor helicopter, and it did a lot of testing work, and people learnt a lot about how to make them from the work that was done at Bristol. Because first of all, it took off and went backwards. They couldn't get it to go forwards, and there were all sorts of things like that. The control, you know, one of the things you have on helicopters is you've got to stop the fuselage rotating. Let's get the model helicopter a moment. I'll just go and get that. One of the things about helicopters is that when you have an engine which makes the rotor go round like this, it makes the engine go round the other way. Can you see that? If you've got an engine which is trying to make this go round, and you're just in air, you try and make it go round that way, and the engine will try to turn the other way, because there's the reaction to what you're trying to do with the wings makes the engine turn in the opposite direction. So what they do on single rotor helicopters is put that little propeller on the back, and that is actually joined up by lots of gearboxes and things to the main rotors, and it makes sure that when you get the main rotor going, the helicopter doesn't spin round and round, and you control which direction it's pointing in by that. So that's how a single rotor helicopter is controlled by, and that's how it controls the direction it's pointing. Now, to control how it goes, whether it goes forwards, backwards or sideways, it has some very complicated gears. Can you see up at the top there, around the rotor there? That's called the rotor head. And there are very complicated bits there which change the angle of the wing as it goes round. As it goes round, it has to make sure that the wing going forwards is giving you the same amount of lift as the one going backwards, because if it didn't, you'd end up with the aircraft would tip over. So what it has to do all the time is change the angle of the wing as it goes round. And then on top of that, that just keeps it stable by making it when it's going forward, it has a lower angle, and when it goes backwards, it has a higher angle, and that balances out because the speeds are different. When they want to go forwards or backwards, you have to use the same mechanism, but through different controls down here, and you make it have more incidence as it comes round the back than it does at the front, and that makes it tip forwards, and it then flies forwards. And you do it the other way, and it will fly backwards or sideways. Oh dear! Luckily, there wasn't a casualty in there. With single rotor helicopters, that is used to stop it turning round. When you come to twin rotor helicopters, they thought that would solve all the problems about that, because you have one rotor going in one direction like that, and the other rotor going in the other direction. So surely that will cancel out. But it doesn't. It doesn't, because when you've got one rotor going like that on that end, and another rotor going like that on that end, what happens? It's pushing air. You see how my hands are going? It's pushing air over the top of the helicopter. And that makes it very difficult to control. And they had to work for a long time to try and get this helicopter to work properly. And it was finding out how to adjust the angles as it went round and round. See? And this one, although it was the first ever helicopter design in the world to fly, and it crashed on its first flight, but they got it working, but they didn't manage to sell any at that stage because there was a problem. If you look inside, you'll see that the pilots are out the front there. There's no way through past the engine into this part, and it's not a very easy thing to load. You just have to load it through these doors at the side. This door here, and I think there may be another one somewhere. No, I think it's just this one. So you can just load people in. Very difficult to load any heavy things in. So what other people did then, we had sorted out the control problems here, but others learnt by it and made bigger aircraft. But we made a bigger one of these, and that's the one that you see on the photograph there. That's one that we actually sold to the RAF. We tried to sell it to the Navy, the British Navy and the Canadian Navy. Both ordered some and then cancelled their orders because we were going, at that time in the 1960s, we were going through a very tough time again with things costing too much, and the government was trying to decide what to spend the money on, and they decided that they couldn't afford to buy them for the Navy. They just bought them for the RAF, and so you had 26 of them sold to the RAF. And that's the one there, and you can see it's actually carrying a heavy load there. And they also, it put the spire on top of the new Coventry Cathedral, which was quite a heavy spire, about 3 or 4 tons, and that was lifted up and put on top of the cathedral, a metal spire. Oh, lift, drag, and yeah. Basically,
how would they use it with the wings for the
well,
lift?
those wings go round and round, and so they're gathering speed, and as the wing comes along through the air, it has lift and drag, but the drag is obviously changing direction as it goes round and round, but the lift is always upwards. So they make their lift by adding all the lifts from those wings to those wings, and that's the way it lifts up. When you see a helicopter, if you look in the front of the helicopters, you'll find that after a while, we started off with the pilot in the left-hand seat, the same as in commercial aircraft. You'll always see the captain in the left-hand seat. Well, it's all right on a commercial aircraft. When you're flying it, you can fly pretty much with one hand. You can take your hand off, you have a yoke, and you fly like this, and you can take your hand off to do other things, but you're flying and controlling the aircraft like that. Helicopters are controlled with 2 hands all the time. And what you have is one hand for a big lever here, and the big lever gives you the up and down lift, and that increases the lift on all of the blades at the same time. So the big lever there goes up and down, and all you've got in the other hand is a stick. You fly it left, right, forwards, backwards, you see, on the stick. So you've got to go in 6 different directions in a helicopter, up and down with this one, and left, right, forwards, backwards with that one. And they found that because most pilots are right-handed, you know, there are some that are left-handed, but they just have to cope with it, the same as with cars and things. But it was much easier to put the helicopter pilot in the right-hand seat so that he was flying with his right hand forwards and backwards, and this one just did the up and down. So there's not so much use of the up and down when you're flying forwards. You've still got to keep your hand on it and do things with it, but his main control was this one here, so with his right hand. So you'll see both of these have the pilot flying in the right hand side, on the right hand side. Okay. Right. Any other questions? Are you happy? Well, I hope you enjoy. Have you made little helicopters yet round the corner, all of you? You have? Did it work? Did it go up in the air? Good. Right. Well, thanks for coming, and I hope you enjoyed. I mean, if you've got any other questions, what you see the RAF flying nowadays are Chinooks, which were developed. Really, they used a lot of the information that they got from these aircraft, and they made bigger aircraft. And what they did too was they put gas turbine engines on instead of these ones are driven by car engines. Both ends, they're car engine or like a car engine. They're internal combustion engines, and so you've got a much more power from something that is the gas turbine part. It's part of a jet engine, the gas turbine, but it just makes things go round, and that is what they use on later aircraft. And they put those engines on the roof instead of inside the fuselage, and that gives you more space in the fuselage. And it also means that the Chinook, for instance, can have a loading ramp at the back end. And so the big twin rotor helicopters you see going over, quite often going over Bristol, are Chinooks. They're American helicopters, but they're the same principle as this, but with more powerful gas turbine engines. Okay, anyone else? Any other questions? Would you like to fly helicopters or aeroplanes? You'd rather fly aeroplanes, would you? Yeah, I enjoy flying aeroplanes, but I just did it as a hobby all my life. It's just nice to be up there in the sky, way above everyone else.